Hey guys, my name is Jack Wall. I'm a composer for all kinds of media. Here to do a gang webinar on Black Ops 6, really. Basically, I've been composing music for games for just about 30 years. I'm really old. But I wanted to share some knowledge from a recent project. We finished this, we recorded in August of 24, and the game came out in late October 25th. So without any further ado, you might know some of my other work. I've done a lot of Call of Duties. I started working on this series back in 2011, really, with Black Ops 2, and I've done 5 of them. I've done 2 other zombie modes, and I've also done the Mass Effect series, 1 and 2, Jade Empire. I don't know, like 30-some games I've done. So, without any further ado, we'll just jump into, a little bit about Black Ops 6. It's sort of like I'm just trying to get my bearings here. A lot of people ask me, like, what's the difference between writing for film, TV, and video games? And for me, it's really not much. It's just a matter of how the music is going to get into it, and what are you going to write for exactly, There's just sort of like when you're talking about film, it's like you spot the film with the director, you sit down and you talk about where music should and shouldn't go in the film, and the palette you're going to use for the score and what type of score it's going to be, and you have all these initial conversations, and then the same thing happens for TV, but it's a much more hectic pace. And then when you get to video games, it's sort of like, somebody the way that I work is, I'll have somebody do a video playthrough of a level, and then we'll spot that, and then I'll figure out ways to get that music into the game. And I have a whole way of doing that I'll discuss as we go forward here. I'm just going to do a case study on how I made the music for Black Ops 6. If you're familiar at all with the score, it sounds like this. And I'm not going to play this whole thing, but I just wanted to show that it's sort of a hybrid score. It's orchestra mixed with, synthetic elements and all that kind of stuff. So that's the thing that is, kind of the signature for most of the Black Ops series. It's sort of a sound we came up with in Black Ops 2, and, we've done it up ever since. So the first thing I do is I ask for everything. As a composer, I want to know, at the beginning, it's sort of like, please orient me. Please like show me what this game is going to be about. What's the story about? I'm generally writing for a story-based mode of the game, the single player campaign. So single player campaign is very linear in a way for Black Ops. We have many, usually around 11, 12 levels that we have to get through, and each one is part of a larger story, and it's sort of cumulative. So, the objectives in one level, you'll need to get to the next level. So in that way, it's linear. In the way we score it, it's sort of like experiential based. So, if, I need to know later on, not at this juncture, but later on, I'll need to know as we do those video playthroughs, like what's really happening. I'll need to know as much as I can about the overall picture of how the flow of this game is going to go. And I'll show you some of the graphics they gave me to help me understand that. But basically, the first thing I want to know before anything gets written is the W's: who, what, where, when, and why, and sometimes even how. like, where is the game taking place? Where are the levels taking place? When is the level taking place? Usually the game, in this case, it was 1991. Who are the main characters? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Who's on my team and who are we fighting against? There's always that conflict, right? What is the story and what is their motivation or the why of what's going on? So, that's pretty important. So some of the materials I got, these are just examples. Every game is different. But in this case, the narrative overview was important for me to get because it was sort of like an overview of the story, what was going to happen in this story. And it looks a little bit like this. Here's a couple of the pages. I'm not going to give you the whole thing. It's like 36 slides or something. So the campaign goals, this is basically the overarching game designer's goal of what this game is going to be like to play it. This I don't really care too much about, but it's nice to know what their focus is on. Player choice, player ownership, that kind of stuff is important to know. And that's why I say give me everything. I just want to know everything. What are they thinking? Are the goals of this game, etc. Then we get into the stuff that really is important to me, the story synopsis. And these are slides that came directly from Treyarch and Raven. So they were like, please read this and understand it just gives me an idea of what the story is going to be. And then this is like a nice look at all the different levels that are in this game. And if you count these up, there's 11 levels. And then you have Safe House, which is sort of where you go in between each level so you can regroup and decide what you're going to do next. And it's a way to convey information to the player in an elegant way that is a safe house where you're not going to get attacked. So you can spend some time doing research if you want and all that kind of stuff. So we actually had music that played in there too. And I'll get into that later, what type of music and how we generated that music. I should say at the beginning, they also gave me a budget for how much music should be in this game because they need to know how much they're paying for. Obviously, we're paid by the minute at this point in history. And it's been that way ever since I joined this industry in 1995. So we're paid by the minute. So my contract says 160 minutes, and it better be 160 minutes, right? So I need to budget that amount of music in between all of these levels, plus all the cinematics, plus anything else they need music for, any other modes. Like I also did 5 sets of music for the multiplayer, which is not story-driven. It's more vibe-based. And, of course, I like to bring in other composers to do that with me, and I guide them through it. I'm sort of the creative director of that. I do 1 or 2 of those, and then I hire other people to do a lot of those because my focus is going to be on these campaign missions and the single player. So then we get into the mission story beats. So each one of these levels, a little bit of a description about what is happening in each level, and then, sort of like the order they're going to happen in, right? These are the rest of the levels. Some of this got changed by the time we finished the game, and that's all good too. But we rolled with it. Not much changed. It was more the end game that changed. Then they give me a little bit of a brief on each character. And of course, they give me other documents that go into way more background about each character, where they came from. Russell Adler is a returning character. Frank Woods is a returning character since Black Ops 2, frankly. And, this game, as I said, Black Ops 2, I think, happened in... Oh, my God, I'm going to forget. I think it was 2025, actually. And then we did Cold War, which is in the 80s, and then this one is in 91. So, all of those time periods are important, to each of those games, but there's certain characters that kind of go through each game too. So, and they're at different ages and different experiences have happened to them. Sometimes you go back in time, sometimes you go forward in time. So it's interesting just to kind of keep track of some of these recurring characters.
One question. For the recurring characters, do you ever find that you have themes that you carry over from game to game, or do you change themes for these characters every time a new time period comes up?
Yeah, I mean, back in Black Ops 2, we created a theme for Alex and David Mason, who are somewhat recurring characters. So but they happen later because that's 25. So they haven't recurred yet, but they're like one of the only ones I actually wrote themes for, because just story wise, it doesn't always make sense to write a character theme. In this case, if I go back to Troy Marshall is really the main character in this, but this is a real kind of ensemble cast, really. Nobody's really the star. I mean, he's one of the leaders, but then you got Russell Adler, who's been around forever, and he's got a lot to say. Jane Harrow's important, Livingstone's important. They're all important. Frank Woods is hugely important. So they're all playing a really important role. So like to create themes for all of these people there's no like level that is like Savati Dumas, like she didn't have her own level really. I mean, she did in contract, but like it wasn't really important that she was the focus of that level, if you know what I mean. So I didn't do a theme for her. But
Yeah.
if it made sense, I would do one. In the case, there was sort of in Black Ops 2, we had Raul Menendez, this Nicaraguan guy who I created a theme for him based on a Nicaraguan lullaby, because his story was that he lost his sister, and I think it was his sister. It's been a while. He lost his sister, and he was really upset about that. So to make him more of a three-dimensional character, not just the evil guy, we did a lullaby for his theme, and we orchestrated it, and we wrote a song about it. It was cool. If we ever see him again, I'm sure that will come back. If we ever see David and Alex Mason again, I'm sure they'll come back. There was one theme from Black Ops 1, which I did not write that score to, that it's escaping me what the track was, but it was an important track for that game. And I think we have sort of tried to bring that back, but it's not very a memorable theme. It was very sort of, I know, it was almost the sound of it that made it something. So it's been tough to do sort of leitmotif in this game, to be honest. Anyway, moving
Gotcha.
on. So we come back to, oops, I'm going too fast. The contract, this is an example of one slide that gets into more detail about this level. So then we're going to talk about the campaign flow chart, and ignore what's on that flow chart on the right. That's just what a flow chart looks like. There's nothing really in there that I use, but like the campaign flow chart is the next slide, which is this. And this was my Bible, because this showed the linearity of each level, not only the linearity of each level, but all of the interstitial transitions, right? All the yellow, orange blurs are basically 3D graphics, motion captured, very high quality interstitial movies. So each one of those was custom scored. So these have real characters in it telling the story of Black Ops 6. When you get to the load movies, those movies are, I don't want to call them less important, but they are montages. They're really creative montage movies while the next level is going to load and happening, and they forward the story. They talk about, like, in the case of that first load after Suspended 3, it talks about what the team is going to have to do, because it's the first time they're about to go to the safe house, and it talks about how they're going to the safe house and what's going to happen at the safe house, right? And then that load movie, though, I believe was a live action movie, if I'm not mistaken, that showed them arriving at the safe house for the first time. So we actually reused the main theme for that bit and edited together. I think I wrote a small outro for that to make it fit and work. And then the obviously the big triangles with the names in it are all the levels, and then the SHs are the safe houses, and that's this is how I kind of understood, when I would get a movie like Union, for example, on the top right, like I would look at where that happened in the context of the entire game. It's always important for me as a composer to understand how this game is flowing, right? And where things are happening. So I'll take copious notes on all that stuff. And then when I start to do these, the first one I did was Sandbox, I think, which is second row on the left. That was the fourth level. So we, we're in Iraq. It's sandy. It's like the desert, and I incorporated a little bit of M.B. Gordy percussion in there, and we got all that going. I didn't have a theme yet for the game, so they just wanted me to write that level before I knew anything about what this game theme was going to be. And I don't like to do that. I like to work on themes for a while and get my theme and understand, feel like my theme is giving a signature to the entire single player campaign. I love doing that, but I didn't get to do that until after I did Sandbox, because we kind of got started late, frankly, and they wanted just a full level done so they could proof it out and concept it out. So we did that, and it worked out pretty well. They did come back to me and say, okay, no more, this works great, but let's not do any more ethnic music in this game. I'm like, okay. So that was kind of funny. But I didn't get this till late April. You see, April 22nd, right? I mean, we're recording in 4 months. So I'm just getting going here. And
so there was a pretty tight turnaround.
It was, yeah, it was. But this gives me a 30,000-foot view of what we're making. And from here, I can start to find the main story beats and create a flow with the score, which I think is super important. I literally had this up on a screen every single day I was working, just so I could refer to it. I referred to it multiple times a day.
I really like the flowchart method. When you're on a huge project, it's so easy to get over-focused on a small detail of the project, but having that flowchart really just keeps you aware of what the big picture is.
Exactly. You feel oriented. You feel like I kind of know what we're making, and that's super important. The next thing I got was character bios. That's pretty self-explanatory. It's just, all that stuff. And then this is kind of the detail of it. This is just the top half of a Word document that was, it just gives me some background on this guy and what his motivations are. And, things like archetype, personality, he's good but chaotic, that kind of stuff. Goes into their personalities, their motivations, their backgrounds, why they're fighting, all that kind of stuff, flaws, charm, all that. And then a bio, when they were born, and it just gives you an orientation on the character, which is, somehow seeps into the writing, I guess, in a way. And then the next thing they gave me, this was strange. I never got this before, but they sent me basically what became the opening movie of the entire game, right? So I thought what I would do now is just play this. This is where they're trying to communicate the style and the tone of what they're trying to achieve. And so they give me this thing, and they asked me to score this, right? So this is the first thing. And I didn't have a theme yet, but I started to create a tone for the music. And so after a couple iterations, they were super into it. And the first thing I wrote was like 2 minutes long. And they were like, well, it has to be a minute long. So it was sort of like trying to make it less and less all the time. But it was a good exercise for me to get started. So as I said, it's basically the opening credits of the game. Similar to what you'd see in a movie or TV show when the credits are rolling first, as you're sort of being introduced to what the think like that sequence in Severance where Adam Scott is like a character, that kind of stuff. It's like one of those. It's not the final visual either. This is not the final, but you will see the final. I'm going to go through this whole process right now. Oh, this is the music from a TV show theme, Mayor of Kingstown. So this is temp music. See, it's 1991 there. Michael Jordan, shots from like what was happening, tear down the wall. Berlin. Yeah, and I'm like, the code name for the game was Cerberus, and I'm like, are you guys calling the game Cerberus? They're like, no, it's going to be called Black Ops 6. I'm like, well, what's the deal with Cerberus? And they're like, I don't know, we just like it. So it was kind of funny. So this now, I wrote the music, right? I wrote a minute of music based on the cuts that I had just seen in that video. And then they took my music and they re-edited the intro to my music, and they added voiceover to convey the time and place and the world of what this game is going to be. And it was the intro cinematic. And this is the first thing you see when you boot up the game. So here's that.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
An entire class of U.S.-Soviet nuclear missiles is eliminated. Means that the era of nuclear disarmament has begun.
We will stay the course, and we will succeed. No doubt. Operation Desert Storm is working.
That's literally the final mix, and after recording orchestra and mixing and sent all the stuff to the post house who did these videos, and they mixed it in a very professional manner. So I was very happy with that. Moving on to cinematics and scripts. This is where they're really telling the story in these cinematics, these sort of blur cinematics I was talking about and the load cinematics, right? So it looks like a script. This is the first scene in Kuwait. It was called, what was it called? It's called Suspended, right? Basically, this is very close to what the original or the end result was. They did change the script quite a bit from what they originally sent me. But I'm going to go over, here's XPAD actually. We're going to do, if I go back to there, it is top row. This is like after they did the first bit of Kuwait. We get into what's they just nicknamed this expat because they're going into Kuwait to capture this guy Alawi, and they want to apprehend him and question him because he's been working with some nasty people. So they give me this video, which I'm just going to play for you. And this is the state that I get this video. This is what I actually write to. And then we'll go through the whole process where from here and then the temp music that I did, or the temporary or the mock-up that I did, and then the final mix with the full, orchestra and everything. So here you go.
Alawi is ahead of schedule.
Whoever he's meeting won't wait around for long.
No, not if it's a smuggler. I'm sure Alawi's paid top dollar to get himself out of the Middle East.
Guess it doesn't really matter. He's coming with us. Outlaw 42, we've got our eyes on the convoy.
Paying the target over. Roger ground. Target confirmed. Waiting on your go. Over.
Do it.
Outlaw 42, you're clear to engage. Out.
Let's go get him.
Copy ground. Engaging and out. Here comes the traffic jam.
Yeah. Now, the important thing about this is that it's a final timed cut. In other words, they're not going to change the timing after this because it affects a whole host of people. It affects the sound design people, all the audio people, including music. It affects all the people making assets for this video. And they wanted to change a lot of these after they had given us a quote-unquote final cut. And they got a lot of pushback from the people who knew what they were doing and had more experience and said, nope, we're not doing that. We're going to move forward with the way it is, and this is just going to have to work because it would have pushed the schedule so far. Anyway, so I'm going to play you next the mock-up music. This is the same video you just saw with my mocked-up musical piece that I did underscoring this video.
Alawi is ahead of schedule.
Whoever he's meeting won't wait around for long.
No, not if it's a smuggler. I'm sure Alawi's paid top dollar to get himself out of the Middle East.
Guess it doesn't really matter. He's coming with us. Outlaw 42, we've got our eyes on the convoy.
Paying the target over. Roger ground. Target confirmed. Waiting on your go. Over.
Do it.
Outlaw 42, you're clear to engage. Out.
Let's go get him.
Copy ground. Engaging and out. Here comes the traffic jam.
Now, cool. You'll notice that I left some space there at the end for the sound design to take over. I did that on purpose. I wrote a tag at the end that you'll see they took out, and the reason they took it out was because the next scene happens right away, and there's other music and stuff happening that that tag would have interfered with, but I didn't know that when I wrote this. So it was just one of those things where they just made it work from some of the stems. You'll hear like a drum roll out instead of any musical out. So now, next thing I'll play is the final mix. This is a final mix with orchestra, final mix video, final visual, final everything. This is what's in the game.
Lowry is ahead of schedule.
Whoever he's meeting won't wait around for long.
No, not if it's a smuggler. I'm sure Lowry is paid top dollar to get himself out of the Middle East.
Guess it doesn't really matter. He's coming with us. Outlaw 42, we've got our eyes on the convoy. Paying the target, over.
Roger, ground. Target confirmed. Waiting on your go. Over.
Do it.
Outlaw 42, you're clear to engage. Out.
Let's go get him.
Copy, ground. Engaging and out. Here comes the traffic jam.
Yeah, cool. So that's just a really a badass thing when you look at the visuals, and it just has a darker feel to it. Everything's darker, and you know, music isn't the most important thing in this, but it's as important as everything else. So how they mix it is yes, you're not hearing every note of the music. I understand that, and I've learned to live with that because you're serving the overall product of it, and you know, you want to make sure the story is being told. So I was very impressed with the way they mix this.
I feel like the music really helped define the tone shifts of the cutscene itself. Like, the beginning was them scouting and the music reflected that, and then the music shifted definitively when the jet appeared, and it
Right.
shifted definitively again when the jet launched its bombs. And
That's right.
it worked with everything else and didn't get in the way of the sound effects. And it seems like a lot of that is, you know, the mixer's job to make sure that the sound effects and the music are kind of in harmony.
It is, but I'm very adamant. I'm also very adamant about making sure that when they send me the video with no music, that the sound effects are somewhat far along, you know, because I want to know what I'm competing with and what I need to stay out of the way of. You'll notice when I did get it, they didn't have a lot of sound design in there. They had some, and I'll take what I can get, right? So, yeah, the first thing I do, Lucas, is when I look at a cue like this, I go through and do all the markers. You know, the first marker was in the beginning when that logo comes up. You know, Kuwait, 1991. And by the way, it wasn't in the final here, but it was in the game. So I'm not sure if that was just an overlay on top of this cinematic or not, but it did hit there, and they mixed that. That sort of horn that I put in there very low, and I was disappointed in that because maybe they weren't seeing that the way I was in the other thing. So unfortunately that happens, and but it was there, and I just really wanted that to be a big punctuation, but I lost that battle. So but yeah, you put the markers in for that, and you put the marker in for when you change to, you know, everything is a build in this queue, right? It starts out with very somber because you're waiting, and then you spot them, and it kind of you spot hit the convoy, it starts to ramp up slightly, and then you know, you get the strings going, and then when when it cuts to the jet, that's another big one. And then letting go of the ordnance is another big one, and then it ramps up into the hit, and then it just gets out of the way. So, yeah, thank you for noticing that. That was very astute of you. That is how it goes.
Absolutely, it was very good spotting.
Yeah.
And I noticed they did keep the tag at the end. They just toned it down a great deal. Like, I think it was just a drum roll, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I had this thing, ba-da-da-da-da-da, which is a theme that I was using at the time. So, that is part of the main theme. But they took all that out and just used a drum roll to get into the next thing. And the next thing is, we're gonna put it all together. This is the whole. This is about a 6-minute sequence where it's the whole beginning of the game, including these two movies and everything that happens between these two movies and just after, so that you see why all this, how this, all of this goes together. So I'm going to play that for you now.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
An entire class of U.S.-Soviet nuclear missiles is eliminated. Means that the era of nuclear disarmament has begun.
We will stay the course, and we will succeed. Operation Desert Storm is working.
Are you denying that?
We have discussed it
What
already.
more do you want, Livingston?
Enough! You disobeyed a direct order, Mr. Marshall, when it was clear your op was compromised.
With all due respect, sir, you weren't there.
And the group that compromised you, the Pantheon, you sure that's who they were?
That's what Alawi called them. When are you gonna tell us what's really going on here?
I'm asking the questions, Mr. Woods.
Sir, if you read the report, you
I read your report, Ms. Harrow. Some of it I still find hard to believe. That's why we're going to go over events again. Only this time, I want to hear it from Marshall. From the beginning.
We were in position near the Iraq-Kuwait border. Small team. Me, Harrow, and Case.
Alawi is ahead of schedule.
Whoever he's meeting won't wait around for long.
No, not if it's a smuggler. I'm sure Alawi is paid top dollar to get himself out of the Middle East.
Guess it doesn't really matter. He's coming with us. Outlaw 42, we've got our eyes on the convoy. Painting the target, over.
Roger, ground. Target confirmed. Waiting on your go. Over.
Do it.
Outlaw 42, you're clear to engage. Out.
Let's go get him.
Copy, ground. Engaging and out. Here comes the traffic jam.
Straight to the exfil point.
Yes. Do not consider.
5 minutes.
Alawi is a minister of defense and close to Saddam. His guards will be well trained and heavily armed.
Movement. Truck doors.
Got it. There's that shooting I remember.
Yeah, so that's the whole first part of the game leading into the first bit of gameplay there. So you see all the transitions between, if I go back to to this thing here, you know, it's basically the World Builder movie. The first blur is that that sort of conference table that they're all talking, and then the character creator got taken out, and then it goes right into, so Suspended 1 goes into Expat, and then we get into the gameplay of Kuwait 1. So that's basically what you just saw, and all the transitions in between, and how we get into, like, when they jump out of the Jeep to engage in that first Kuwait thing, then we're into a musical loop. You know, it was like an intro for the level, and then a musical loop. So that's basically the whole beginning of the game. So, and now I thought I would play you guys. We recorded this whole thing. Some of you may have seen this, but we recorded it at Air Studios in London on August 5th, 6th, and 7th, and something like that, over 3 days. And we filmed it. We filmed part of it, and these really talented filmmakers put like a little behind the scenes together, so I thought I would play that next. Every single Call of Duty is its own animal, its own world, and I really embrace that. So it's very exciting to get that call and to say, hey, we're getting ready to go again. And then you're like, okay, let's make it happen. We're here in Air Studios, London, recording the score for Call of Duty Black Ops 6. When I first start the process of writing a score, I ask for everything that they have, because they've been working on it by the time I start, right? And I comb through it, so they have artwork, they have characters, they have story design, they have all the different elements in pieces, and I just ask for all of it. And they always laugh at me like, oh, Jack wants everything, you know, give him everything.
Jack has a deep history with the Black Ops franchise.
Starting with Black Ops 2 back in 2012, Jack has since scored every single Black Ops series game that we've released.
I always get excited when we do an orchestral recording. It's just the environment, the atmosphere, the energy. It's just a lot of fun to hear these amazingly talented musicians bring the soundtrack to life. We've put a lot of time and effort into where these scores end up, and this is just the icing on the cake to get to hear it live in a room like this in Air Studios.
Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is based in 1991. So we wanted to bring into the score some elements from that era. And so, you know, that's the era of Nirvana, you know, Metallica, all that stuff, Soundgarden. But we wanted to modernize it. We don't like to do exactly what was happening in that era. We like to take those elements and modernize them. So to that end, I found these two brothers in Toronto. They have a band called Rome's, and they sound to me like a modern approach to all that type of music. This is an amazing sound, so I collaborated with them on a number of pieces of music in the score, most notably the multiplayer theme for this iteration of Call of Duty. It's called Raining the Fire.
We've been doing a full orchestra with about 45 strings and another 20 or so brass.
Pretty nice take.
Yeah, great take.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Next. What happens when you come in a room like this with these musicians? It raises the bar on everything. These are the best musicians in the world. They read music like you and I read a book. It's just like that. They come in, they've never seen this music. It goes down in 1 or 2, maybe 3 takes.
The whole thing has a very rich, lush and sort of cinematic feel to it. With G.A.N.G, you need to have material that maintains the energy, is in the spirit of the story that you're trying to tell, but at the same time, if you're taking a long time on a particular level, the music keeps going, you know. So there is this sort of non-linear element to it, which is both exciting in terms of creating a musical challenge. How do you do something that's interesting when you keep repeating it?
I'm quite honored to be working with Treyarch. They are so trusting in what I do, and they give me the freedom to experiment and to do all kinds of things with their scores. We do some wacky things over the years. I basically had one game theme, which is the main theme, and I sprinkle that all through the score. The thing about that is that, you know, I never feel good about writing the music to the rest of the game until I have that theme. You know, once I have that theme, I'm like, okay, now I can write, because I'm gonna be able to sprinkle this everywhere and create this sort of leitmotif for the game. My biggest challenge is always the main theme, and when I'm gonna write for that and the multiplayer theme. Those are the things that keep me up at night until I get it done. And I feel like once I get that, it's just smooth sailing from there.
He's really nailed the vibe. He's been faithful to the earlier versions, at the same time bringing new material to it.
I really try to make every score different in some way, do new things and push myself to new places.
Jack's super talented. It's obviously the reason he continues to come back and work with us every time around. Call of Duty is one of the biggest games ever created as a franchise, and Jack's been able to bring his experience and expertise as a composer to that franchise, and he crushes it every time out.
He writes so well. He understands the instruments, he understands the mediums, and you know, he's been working doing orchestral music, film music, and game music for a long time, so he just knows what he needs to do.
You know, the Grammys now have a category for video game scores. It's only been out for 2 years. Jack hasn't had an opportunity with Call of Duty to be up for a Grammy, but fingers crossed, this next year we'll be able to put him up in that category and hopefully bring home a Grammy.
A Grammy? Who said Grammy? I'm Jack Wall, composer of Black Ops 6. Play the game, I hope you love it, have fun, and we'll see you next time. I swear to God I didn't pay them to say those things.
I believe you.
Sure, Jack. They were very kind to me. Yeah, that was such a fun session. I've recorded at Abbey Road a few times, and you know, Nashville a bunch, and Seattle, and a bunch of other places in Europe, and I think this was the most fun I've ever had. Although Abbey Road is pretty great too.
Yeah, Abbey Road and Air are both amazing, but it looks like Jeff Foster completely knocked it out of the park with the engineering on that scoring session.
Oh yeah, he is one of those engineers that really is more than an engineer, you know? He brings such a depth of experience. He's more of a help me produce it, you know?
Yeah, he's an engineer with a musical background and musical taste that he can incorporate into his technical decisions.
Absolutely. And he understands the psychology of the room probably better than any other engineer I've ever worked with in a situation like that. And I've worked with some really good engineers, but he just understands how to keep things moving and in a way that is absolutely invaluable. Yeah, I hope to get back with him again on the next one. So anyway, that's basically my presentation. So, you know, just want to open it up to any questions people have and go from there.
I just have a few, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. When you were planning the orchestral sessions and all the extra live player overdubs, how did you go about figuring out, or how much time you needed to book in the studios to cover like that whole 160 minutes of music?
Well, that's a really good question. We started out with the It's always a complex thing to wrangle, because you have, basically the way we do it is I'll do my contract for my services as a composer. And then sometime down the line, after we figure out what we're doing, we'll decide, okay, now we need to start organizing the sessions for orchestra. And so at that point, I hire my longtime music prep team, managed by Desrochers Music Services, which is Audrey and Ross Desrochers, and now their son, Jonathan. Been working with them for 20 plus years. 25 years. So I just go back and look at every single budget I've ever done for this series, and it's always somewhere between 60 and 80 minutes of music that gets recorded. So of the 160, that's how much gets recorded. Other things are either not recorded and left as, using samples because they sound good as is, or I'm using more individual musicians instead of, needing to have a full orchestra. It's really more electronic. We did a number of electronic cues in this one, which I mixed all of those. So, myself. So that wasn't part of the recording budget. I could just do it in my studio. So in this case, because I wanted to work at Air, which is super expensive, I budgeted 60 minutes of music, thinking that should be enough. And then as things went on and the score started to reveal itself, it was becoming very clear that we needed more like 75, 80, 85 minutes of music recorded. So I actually, for the first time in my history with Activision, went back and asked for more money, because it was just going to be, we found ways. It wasn't actually that much more money, because we always build in a lot of contingency to the budgets. So I had a lot of extra money in the budget, and, a lot of composers don't do this, but if I have extra money in my budget, I send it back to them, and they're always kind of amazed that I do that, but they trust me now, right? So because I asked for more money, because in the past, if I didn't use the money, I gave it back to them. They've done things like, oh, you're giving us all this money back, so we're going to do a special edition vinyl and give it out to all the developers. So they don't even know what to do with it when I give it back, because it's already spent in their mind, So they spend it on something else.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great show of integrity on your part.
Exactly. I feel that's important, right? I'm not going to just keep their money and put it in my pocket. They're already paying me well to be the composer, and this is a separate budget, and it should be treated as such, and I feel like I should give it back to them. A lot of people tell me that I shouldn't do that, but I do it because it has built trust over the years. They totally trust what I'm doing. And then when I go back and ask them for more money, they know it's real, right? I'm not just asking for more money because I want more money. I'm asking for more money because I needed to make the score what it needs to be. So they obliged me on that. But then because I did that, there wasn't a lot of contingency built in, So we spent literally every penny on the score, and I may have even, slightly one way or the other. It's like it was a hairy situation. But I think we did about 80 minutes of score, which is half the score,
That's a really impressive amount of live music, especially to record over the course of. Well, actually, you said you recorded over 3 days. Did you have to do any extra sessions after that, or like when you decided you needed more music, or was all that incorporated into the 3 days?
No, we actually added. We weren't doing that many sessions. We were only going to do 2 days, and then we did 3 days. That's how we.
Gotcha. That's how that worked out.
Yeah, and it was a much more relaxed situation doing 3 days, because in London they have all these regulations about like They used to allow you to do triples, so 3 sessions in a day. They don't allow that anymore. But they did for us. We actually did strings in the morning, 3 hours, hour break, then a 3 or 4 hour brass session. No, 3 hour brass session, and then a dinner break, and then a 2 hour brass session. So it was like, you know, we figured out a way to work around their stuff, and we found out late in the game there was this one regulation that no one was aware of and no one made us aware of, and it had to do with, what was it? Something like if you're doing an overdub on a cue, you cannot do it within the same session. So you have to wait for another session to do the overdub. So it made planning really difficult. And we spent my music prep team spent like a day just rejiggering everything and figuring out how we could make that work in the time we had. So, you know, because we were like, yeah, let's just do, you know, a bunch of things on an overdub in the same session using the strings. No, we couldn't. If there was like a short and a long string, for example, there's a short string pass and a long string pass, we couldn't do both of those in the same session on the same cue. So we had to do all of the long strings in one session, and then maybe in the next session we could do all the short strings for that cue. So as you can imagine, that would make like budgeting your time very, very tricky and a real puzzle. So, but we were able to do it.
Were there any unique challenges scoring Black Ops 6 compared to the other games?
Well, that was probably the most unique challenge. That having to reschedule every cue, and Audrey is amazing at that. That's why she's been working with me forever. She squeezes every ounce of music she can out of every nickel we spend, and it was a huge challenge to react to that rule that we didn't know about, because that rule does not exist, say, in Nashville or other places. So this was a reaction to that was like, oh, we better figure out, you know, how to do this. And a lot of it was like, you know, we actually don't need to separate these in this queue. We can play them all together, you know, in these queues. It's not that important to have these separation in these queues. So that kind of stuff. And we went through every queue and talked it through, and everyone agreed on the right path forward. And that was the biggest challenge. It was more of a technical challenge. In terms of writing, they're all very, very complex monsters, you know. It's, you know, the first month I'm just trying to get my head around what the game is and what, you know, what the story's going to be, and where the focal points are, and where the ebbs and flows are, and the rises and falls, and all that stuff. So every game has those challenges similarly, but you know, it was also I would say not a challenge, but kind of a fun thing. This is probably the most collaborative team effort I've done. We had a team of composers on this, and that was kind of its own kind of, you know, I guess you could call that a challenge, to make sure everybody's on the same page and it sounds like the same score, and it, you know, all that kind of stuff. But like, I revel in that. Like, I love working with other people, and I had a great team of composers working with me. My longtime assistant Jim did quite a bit of writing, which I was really proud of him on that. He's been with me for like 13 years, and he's writing some good stuff. And then I got this new guy, Sean Chen, and this Portuguese guy. I live in Portugal, and I have a friend named Pedro Macedo Camacho, who has written, you know, lots of great game scores on his own. And he came in and did a few cues and really killed it. And, you know, it was just fun working with all these guys, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like a really nice team dynamic.
Myself, Jim, and Sean, we did the bulk of the music. And I probably did half the music at least. But it's worth it to me to get other points of view. Oh, the Rome's guys too. Yeah, I mentioned those guys in the video. Jake and Nick Beetove from Toronto have this band called Rome's. Check them out on Instagram. It's Romes, like Rome, Italy, but Rome's plural. And their music is really, really amazing. Nick's an amazing drummer and technologist. He does a lot of cool effects on his drums, and that was a cool sound for the score that we wanted to get in there. So it was fun collaborating with those guys and me layering orchestra on top of what they did and rearranging, and it was fun. It was really cool. It was like real music production, it's like being in the studio in the 90s. just like, we're trying to write for. It's great.
That's just super, super cool. That's also a good transition into my last question. What sort of soloists and individual musicians, and I'm cards on the table. I do work with MB, and MB recorded on this score as a
Yes,
extra solo musician.
you're always involved in my scores because you're MB's engineer. So, and MB, like double Grammy winning musician. So I have to have him now.
Double Grammy winner. It's still crazy. That's sinking in. But the question is targeted towards all of the musicians or the extra solo musicians that you hired on this score. Like, what was it like getting to work with them, and what led you to decide to bring in different instrumentalists?
Well, it really depends on the cue and the level and stuff like that. And I kind of cast it like putting a band together for the level, and it's like who do I think could work on what music I'm writing. So I brought like George Deering in to write some guitar stuff for this one level, this very technical level called Contract, and he just created some great atmospherics with his guitar playing, and he's got this baritone ukulele that is so cinematic sounding. Like when he plays it, it's just, I just give him the chords and he just riffs on it, and it's just amazing. Stuff like that was really important, I usually have some cello. I had a little bit, not that much on this one. I'm just trying to remember. Oh, this guy, Juan Garcia Herreros from Spain, he played basses on a number of kind of really heavy cues that we did that were more electronic,
Were they like electric basses or acoustic basses or both?
Like electric, yeah.
Gotcha.
But he would bow them, and he would use them to make pads, and he would do really groovy, bass lines. Just sounds really cool. Really great stuff. A number of guys came in. Tina Guo played a little bit on the Sandbox cues. I had her play some electric cello, which was fun. And, that's always fun to have her play on it to give it a little extra energy there. She also did like a video of her playing it too, which was funny. It's fun to watch. So it's usually a combination of different players. Of course, MB did a bunch of percussion for me because I love his playing, and we just work so well together. It's just so fun. I've been working with him since like 2008.
Now we're going to open up questions to the audience. Thank you so much, Jack, for the wonderful presentation.
Pleasure.
So we have some questions in the chat to get to. The first question would be, fast intermission, yes. Sorry, looking at the chat. How did you divide and organize music for the additional composers to complete? Are you using similar templates, and do you ultimately proof all of their stuff before forwarding it for approval?
Let's see.
It's the top question.
I see it. Yes. So when I work with other composers, I'm sort of the creative director of the score in that role. And And so, and usually I'll give a number of cues in a level to a composer like Sean Chen. I think Sean's here. Hi,
Yeah,
Sean.
Sean is here.
Yeah. Sean's a great guy and a great composer. He's recommended to me by my friend Trevor Morris, who said, "Yeah, you gotta take a look at this guy. He's great." So, Sean came in. I would ask him to do like quite a few cues in a level, and just so he could get in the groove of it, because a lot of this is written, as I sort of alluded to in the presentation before. I'll get a full level playthrough, and then we'll spot that level. Jim will take notes. We'll create all the notes for that level and where music's going to go, and a file naming convention and all that kind of stuff. And then I kind of go through it a second time myself and just make sure I set based on the budget I have for how much music can be in the level. I'll go in and assign how much, just based on my experience, how long each cue should be. And then I'll get with one of the composers on the team and say, "Hey, can you do this, this, and this? I'll do these." And then every once in a while, like we'll collaborate on a cue too, which is kind of cool. Or I'll say, "Hey, here's my themes that I'm using," and I'll put them in Sibelius, and I'll just send them a PDF of the basic motifs, and they sprinkle those in when it makes sense. And so Sean was very good at that, and so was Jim, and even the Rome's guys did a great job with that stuff. The Rome's guys would then also play on a lot of cues, maybe that Sean or Jim or I wrote, and so we collaborated in that way as well. So once I would get, Sean would or Jim would send me a cue that they had worked on, and I would give them notes, and then or not, or it was just good out of the box. But the focus was it's all going to sound like the same score, and it's all going to feel like it's coming from the same group of people, if not one person. So, but I honestly feel like the score is better having those guys involved, because it just feels more exciting to me, and I feel if I'm more excited, hopefully it's working out, So yeah, that's basically how we do it.
Gotcha. So templates were, did you use templates that everybody had to do, or did you kind of just rely on people to match the sounds within their own systems and just using their ears?
No. At the head of it, the template has to be exactly the same. So not the writing template, but the final product. So all of the we deliver 19 stems.
Gotcha.
So they're pretty wide. And that's what gets used later on. Usually we deliver, the intros, the loops, and the outros for each cue ready to go in the game, right? But then we also deliver all the stems as well. And then the implementers have the ability to go back to the stems to create new cues if they need to say, okay, the action music is great, but we need a quieter section. So I want to go through the stems and create a quieter version of this cue that maybe isn't so epic or whatever. So they'll cut out some of the big horns, or they'll cut back some of the percussion, or just have like a bass line instead of everything together. And they have the ability to kind of create new cues from the stems. So that's how we do that. But yeah, we start with exactly, to the letter, and to, the capitalization and the lowercase, like every name of every single stem is exactly the same for the entire team. So when I don't care if they use Logic, Cubase, Ableton, doesn't matter. As long as everything looks exactly the same when it comes in, then it's much easier to record on, because we have the same 19 stems called the same things. And then it's all gets collated at the end before the session, and everything's exactly the same. And so, if everyone delivers the right kind of click track and the right MIDI time code, and, we're all at 30 frames, and, so it's all matches up when it goes to the recording stage. It's all frame accurate, and everybody's doing the same exact thing.
Yep. So
Yeah.
students take note. Consistency and attention to detail is absolutely key when you're working on a composition team.
Yeah, and then we'll also talk about palette quite a bit. Like like for this game, I spent a few months writing on my own without any help because I wanted to create the vibe and how we're gonna how I the tone of the score and the melodies and the themes and stuff like that. Once I had that, it's like here's what I'm using. I don't care if you use different string libraries. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. But like as a suggestion, we'll get on the phone and say, hey, what do you guys like? What are you using? And everyone has great suggestions, and then we all just get those libraries if we don't have them, or we share libraries that I make for custom because sometimes I'll hire people to make libraries for something, or I'll even create sounds myself during the early part of the score, and then share those on the team. So
Awesome. And I just have one announcement before we get to more questions. I wanted to mention that the score to Black Ops 6 is nominated for the ASCAP Composer's Choice Awards. I'm going to post a link in the chat so that everybody can check that out. If you are an ASCAP writer, voting is open to all ASCAP writers through March 7th. So congratulations, Jack.
thank you. Look, pretty cool nomination, I have to say, because it's like composers, saying that. So that's pretty cool.
The next question, do the studios you work with usually lay in temp music for everything before you get a chance to compose? And is this problematic for the creative process?
Let's see. I don't mind temp music. They don't use a lot of temp music at Treyarch. They just kind of give me, sound design and atmosphere, and that's kind of it. And then we do it that way. But if like in one of those Blur movies, they might put something in. I don't think they really did that on this one though. But if they have a very the track is funny. This is a very rare thing to say. They almost never give me any notes. They just say Jack's in charge of the score. Whatever he delivers, it's done. And it's very rare for them to tell me, we don't really like that. Can you try that again? Which I find to be amazing, and very rare. Most of the time you get somebody who, they might be a frustrated composer and they want to, put their stamp on it. But like the guys at Treyarch, and a lot of them are composers because they write for Zombie Mode if I'm writing for other things, it's quite remarkable that they don't give me a lot of notes. I don't even know how to say any more than that about it. But I would say that on projects where people are very, like I've done a number of TV shows where it's all temp music, and I've been on situations where most of the time they don't want me to do the temp. They want me to do my own thing because they want it to be unique. But sometimes, I've been in game situations where, they'll say, we want it to sound like this. I have a lot of stories about that that I won't bore you with. But very early in my career, I was working on a game, and it was back in the early 2000s, and they temped into a trailer they were doing for the game Mystery Exile. They temped in Hans Zimmer's Crimson Tide. Everybody was using that. Da-da-dun, 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 bum, bum, da-da-dun, da-da-dun. It was on everything back then. And so I didn't start anywhere near that, but I had a similar vibe to it. And they just kept coming back to me wanting it closer and closer and closer to Crimson Tide. And I finally got really close. And then I said, I'm sorry, this is terrible because it's not Crimson Tide. but it's me trying to sound like Crimson Tide with shitty samples. Um, and then the funny thing was, um, they finally said they were at E3 and they said, well, we need a build now, so go ahead and mix it. And they sounded so dejected. It was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose this gig before I even start. So I brought in a horn player to my studio and we layered all the horn parts and re-recorded all the horn parts from it. And then I sent it and they called me and they were freaking out because, I mean, it was so much better than the samples were back then. They couldn't believe, they said, was that horn part even in the thing? You know, and I was like, yeah, that was there, but maybe not as good as it is now. But you know, that wouldn't happen necessarily today because horn samples are really good now. But that was just a really funny thing. They were so happy with it. We're not going to give you any more notes ever again. You know, it was like they were really happy with it. So it really is just a matter of who you're dealing with. I've actually left projects because I couldn't make anybody happy. I once did started a game, and it was the story of this game was so cool. I was so into it, and then over time, over a course of a few months, they kept chopping away at the story until it was just a boring, you know, shooter, and there was no story anymore. Like all the cool elements were gone, and the entire team was schizophrenic about what they wanted. One guy wanted like North by Northwest, you know, Bernard Herrmann or whatever. And then another guy wanted music that I had written for Miss 3. And then another guy wanted something completely electronic and different. And they were all coming at me separately asking for this stuff. And at some point I put my hands up and said, guys, I don't think this is going to work out for you or me. So you should find somebody who can do this. And I just bowed out. That was a hard thing to do, but I think it was the best thing for my sanity.
That's tricky. But like, there isn't a composer alive that can actually combine all of those styles
and you
together.
wouldn't want that anyway. You just wouldn't want it. And I went back and listened to the score, and it was just very hybrid electronic. It was very directed, you know, very much that. But yeah, so temp does not bother me. It doesn't really bother me like it bothers some people, because I feel like at least it's communicating. Like sometimes music's hard to talk about, and so if you put temp score in, at least people are communicating, we like this, right? And you can grok from that what it can be. But you don't do that, because if you do that, then you're you know, there's all kinds of stories in Hollywood of composers doing that and then people forcing them to do closer and closer to the temp and then getting sued later. And then the studio backs off and says, oh, we had nothing to do with it. That's his fault. You know, it's like, oh, I'm not doing that. And you're ultimately responsible if you get too close to somebody else's music. So I don't do that. So, or at least I try not to.
Always better to play it safe and not get too close to the temp.
Yeah.
Let's see. On to the next question. Let's see. When you're divvying up work, is QDB, you know, the software QDB, feasible to be used for games, or do you track progress differently?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, QDB would be great, except I haven't used that. When I was doing, I stopped doing TV shows in like 2018, and I wasn't using QDB. I was using something else that I can't remember what it was. My assistant was here; he'd probably remember. But then there was QDB, sort of came out. I was made aware of it after that, but I stopped doing. I stopped, like COVID happened, and I didn't get it back into TV as much. But I use our, you know, with Treyarch, we just use a SharePoint, Microsoft SharePoint, which is like basically it's a online spreadsheet like Google Sheets or something, but it's more secure for them. So our Q sheets are on that. And so we create those for each level, one tab for each level, just like an Excel spreadsheet. And that's how we do it.
Nice. Um, and let's see, how did you decide between Air and Abbey Road when you were choosing studios?
In 2019, I was working on a TV show, a few cues with Trevor Morris, and we flew to Air Studios. And I'd never been there before. I'd heard a lot of great things, but I had worked at Abbey Road a number of times. And we were there for, I think, 2 days. And I was the booth guy. He was conducting, and I was score reading. And I couldn't believe how amazing it sounded. And Jeff was the engineer, Jeff Foster. And the sounds he was getting were just so beautiful and just so like it sounded like a record just coming out of the speakers, you know. And I was just like, it sounds like a movie in here, like immediately. The room itself is just perfect. It's not too big. Abbey's very big and you have to control the size of the room, right? Um, but it does sound really good. Like I sometimes I go back and listen to my score from Black Ops 2 that was recorded there, and it sounds really good. But there's just something really, really pristine about Air Studios. So I vowed the next opportunity I would go back to Air Studio. I would go to Air Studios and do a full score. So I just wanted to go there, you know. I love Abbey too, though. I would go back there in a hot second.
Yeah, they're both fantastic, but it's interesting to know from somebody that's recorded at both places what you think the differences are.
Yeah, I don't know. There's just sort of a focus of that room. And I can't explain it other than to say it sounds like a movie when I listen to it. It sounds like you're in a movie theater when you're in the room listening to them play. It's just perfect to me.
How good do the mock-ups have to be to deliver to devs in your opinion?
Um, you know, it's funny. It's a funny question because like I don't do things separately. Like when I compose, I'm always mixing. So by the time I'm done the cue, I'm pretty happy with the mix. It's not like I'm handing them shit because I'm going to re-record this. And sometimes when, you know, you guys saw when, when I was doing like, here's the mock-up and then here's the recording, here's the live recording all mixed with sound effects and dialogue. When you hear just the music, there's a huge difference, right? There's more life, there's more air, there's more space, you're moving more air, which always creates these beautiful mistakes and beautiful, not really mistakes, but like unintended consequences when you record live that are just delicious and just lovely. And I can't not do that. I would stop writing right now if I couldn't do that. So but as I'm writing, I am and I'm at this point like I don't feel like I need to get every sample library ever made because the samples I have are quite good and I know they'll get better when I do record. And I know how to make the samples sound better and with certain reverbs and depth and placement and all kinds of stuff. So I'm just constantly mixing. My first career was as a record mixer. So I wouldn't call myself that now because I don't spend every day in a recording studio mixing records, but I used to do that many, many years ago. And so mixing is sort of second nature for me and I enjoy doing it. That said, I wouldn't want to mix the orchestra because there's too much complexity there. And I have Phil McGowan to do that for me. But I feel like I think the mock-ups sound pretty good. Yeah, if I do say so. Yeah.
And Phil McGowan is great. I think there's an well, I might mess up this expression, but record as though there won't be a mix process, mix as though there won't be a mastering process. Like, try and make it as good as possible at whatever stage you're at.
Yeah.
If
indeed,
I mean you are the main guest, but if I might put some advice into this as well, it's like if you're going to do a mock-up, just do it to the best of your ability. Never be like, oh, it's only a mock-up. I could
Yeah, I don't think I've
add.
ever done that. Yeah, I don't think I've ever done that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good practice to phone it in just because it's a mock-up. So whatever is the highest quality you can achieve with your current system, I would go for it.
Yeah,
Guided by
I'm just all that to say. I'm just when I'm making a mock-up of a cue, even though I know I'm recording it, as I'm writing it, I'm mixing it. So they're not two separate processes for me. I'm not like, here's my mock-up stems, somebody else mix it for me. I'm just mixing it myself, and my entire team does the same thing.
Yeah, and then when it does go to a mix engineer, then like Phil McGowan, then they don't have to start from scratch. They're already working with something that's fairly well balanced.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. To the point where when I go to the mix stage, I have 79 what we call synth masters, and those are just individual recordings of tracks. Some of them are combined, so because sometimes I have more than that many tracks, or I don't, and they're all going to. It's a complicated setup, but like each um Jesus, do I want to get into this? This is very complex. But my template is each track goes to a quad stem called a synth master. The quad stem then gets, or from that track, I can send to Reverb, which goes to an effects set of stems, which don't usually typically get printed on their own, but they get sent and combined with the synth master stems into a 5/1 stem or 7/1 stem or whatever I'm working in, and then it gets down mixed to a stereo stem uh, final mix, which are all those stereo stems are 19 wide, but the synth master stems of each individual track are 79 wide. So all of that goes to the stage, but we meticulously go through and mute the ones we know we're not going to use before it gets to the stage. But it's always there. All of them are just there. And so when Phil is mixing, he's typically using my mix stems, whether it's 5/1 or stereo, because I have both. We for this game we used a very weird thing for the anything that was a cinematic that wasn't getting sent to Charles Denon's group to mix. We put certain cues in dual stereo, so front and back stereo, so that it could sound like a surround mix. It's just all kinds of stuff. And then most of the game music is in stereo. So that's how we do it. So then
I love that technical sort of stuff.
by the time it gets mixed by Phil, he can just use my mix stems and then add the orchestra. But he'll mute like the orchestra and then only add in, string stems if he needs them. If he needs them to fill out. But I don't think he did much of that in this one.
Do you have any tips for new composers or music producers that are trying to get into the industry?
Yeah, I'll say what I always say. I think it's much harder to get in the industry today than it was when I did. I think there was 5 of us doing it. That's how old I am. But I think that it's all about your network. As composers, the cool thing about being a composer is that it's a lifetime of learning, right? So you learn, first thing you do is learn to compose because that's what you want to do. And then you learn how to engineer and mix. And then you learn how to balance. And then you learn how to work with people and be a person who is a problem solver and not a problem. That's a really big one. Networking is huge. So I would create a network tree and maybe even a database in this very technical world we live in. Just use a database like Airtable. Keep track of all of the people that you know and then all the people they know, and just start building that. And then go to conferences, go to Game SoundCon, go to Game Developers Conference, go to anywhere where people can actually see you and talk to you. Don't just live online, but be good online, be good with social media, be good with all that stuff. All these things you have to be good at if you want to increase your odds and increase your luck. You must always be in the room as much as possible. And when you do get the opportunity to do something for a composer, you want to try to write for a composer if you can, like Sean did with me, for example, on this go around for the first time. I'm definitely going to hire Sean again. It's before I can anymore because he's going to have a huge career. But it's like that. It's just keep networking and keep being visible to anybody that's like a game designer, writer, audio director, especially. Anybody who has the power to hire you, it's good to know those people and try to be not annoying, but persistent. And then just be as good a composer as you can, be as creative as you can. Try to have a sound that's not like anyone else, but is good. These are a lot of aspirational things, but I think they're important to make that effort to do all those things.
Yep. And I'm glad you mentioned luck earlier. There's always this element of being in the right place at the right time that exists in this industry, but you do have a certain degree of control over your own luck by how many places you choose to be in, which I think was an excellent point that you made. It's also my advice to students if I'm ever giving a college lecture or something like that, where I just say try and volunteer for as many things as possible, meet as many people as you can at conventions and meetings, and just generally like put out good energy. So that's
Yeah,
the
and
control.
everybody's different too in a way. Like some people are they're just not very they don't love the shaking of hands kind of stuff, right? They don't love uh, you know, being social as much as some other people do. But as long as like you find your people, you put yourself in enough there's a lot of like-minded people, no matter what kind of person you are, and you can grok with them and be able to make connections, right? Even if it's a smaller group that you might have if you're a little shy. If you're not so shy, maybe that gets you into more places quicker, and you move through the world a little bit more easily that way. But I think there's opportunities for all kinds of personalities, but personality and just be a good person, just be easy to deal with, I think.
Absolutely. We are at 12:36. Do you have time to answer one more question?
Yeah.
All right. Could you talk about how the music got into the game in terms of the middleware, like Wise or Fmod? How did the game devs incorporate your music into the game?
Okay, so Treyarch uses their own proprietary and audio engine. So they've been writing it for many, many years. And it's evolved into having a lot of the features of like a middleware like Wise or Fmod or something. So because it's proprietary, I have nothing to do with that process. They have a whole team of people that is very, very good at putting this music in. Oh, it's not just Treyarch, it's also Raven. There's this guy, Jeremiah Seapolt there, who's the audio director for Raven. He's genius at implementation. So I think he implemented on this one almost all of the score. So our job is just to give him as many options as possible. That's why we give him 19 stems. That's why we create our own loops and intros and outros so he can just put them in quickly because it's one guy doing the whole game, right? So we make it as easy as possible for him. I haven't always done that because we've had more time or we've had more people on it, but it's not hard to make a loop, so we just do that.
Yep. So the audio implementation team isn't so much a team as it is one person with a very efficient workflow.
Yes, he uses Reaper, so he makes a lot of automations happen with Reaper. So it's kind of like he's pretty much a genius at that stuff. So, it's one of those things where AI is now becoming a friend in circumstances like this. I can't speak to that exactly because I'm not sure exactly how he used Reaper to do some of these things, but I do know that, as you can imagine, one of the tough things is when I do the mock-ups, they put that in the game, right? So I think what they use Reaper for is once the live version is done, they can throw all the live versions in a folder and Reaper will somehow just know where to put them in what folders to put them in or something like that. So that's how they do it. And like this was the first time where replacing the live recorded orchestra files was really quick because of the way Jeremiah does everything. So it was just about efficiency and using some pretty slick tools.
Right. To a couple questions in the chat, I apologize. We can't actually answer questions about how much things cost in terms of the recording budget. But the last question that I think we can answer.
It's too complicated a topic anyway. It's such
there's
ordeal.
Rates and scales and all sorts of things. But let's see. Was the duration of the score defined by the developers, or did you calculate the 160-minute estimate yourself?
Well, I've been working with Treyarch and Activision now for 13 years, something like that. No, I don't know. So no, since 2011, so it's 14 years. One of the bonuses of working together on all these games is that we kind of know what we need. And so we went through some hell on the first couple games about what we needed and what we didn't. I remember one game we budgeted 100 minutes, or they budgeted 100 minutes, but we needed 160 or whatever it was, and that almost got people fired because it was such a huge difference in what they thought the music budget would be, but what they really needed was much more. So it was we all learned something from that. So we just basically 160 minutes of music is what we do for these big games because they're all about the same. They're all designed to be about the same length of gameplay, and so that's what we do. That's how we do it.
So
and I just make sure
it became somewhat of a standard.
Yeah, for us, it's a standard since like the last 2 games, I would say.
Well, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and the amazing answers. I want to mention again that the score is nominated for the ASCAP Composer's Choice Awards, and I did post a link in the chat so you guys can check that all out. Let's see. There's also... Yeah, absolutely, Jack. There's also the GDC is coming up, and the Game Audio Network Guild Awards are going to be happening at GDC, so hope to see everybody there. Thank you, Brian, in the chat. Yeah, Jack, are you going to be at GDC this year?
I'm not. I'm teaching a class in Bulgaria. Sofia, Bulgaria is the home of the Film Scoring Academy of Europe. It's a really prestigious place. It's like an MFA program. So I'm going there to teach a 3-week class during that time on game scoring. So that's going to be fun.
Oh, fantastic.
Getting ready to leave. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. I'm going to be posting this onto YouTube in the next couple days. And yeah, thanks for sticking around.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you coming. That's means a lot, and hope you got something out of it. I enjoyed doing this. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Till next time.
Bye-bye.